21st, and we are in Marquette, Michigan. My name is Scott Fury. I am the interviewer, S-C-O-T-F-U-R-E. Our camera person is Aaron McGrath, A-A-R-O-N-M-C-G-R-A-T-H. Sir, if you'd say and spell your name for me, please.
Yeah, my name is James P. Orwig. That's James, J-A-M-E-S, P, and O-R-W-I-G.
And what is your date of birth, sir?
My date of birth is May 30th, 1919.
And what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Army, first in the Medical Corps, and then in the 10th Mountain Division.
Okay. And what was your rank?
Well, I reached the top rank of technical sergeant, platoon sergeant ranking. That was the highest rank I received.
Okay. And where did you serve?
Overseas, you mean? Or various camps that I've been in?
Why don't you just kind of do the whole summary?
Well, yes. I started out at Camp Grant, Illinois. I was sent there as a replacement among a lot of other young fellas to be a replacement in field medical work, though I wasn't qualified for that necessarily. But they needed some warm bodies, and I was sent there, and after training, going through the first 3 months of basic training, then I was retained there as part of the cadre of Company B to be active in further training with other recruits. And I was there for 2 years doing that at Camp Grant, which was essentially, I became a platoon sergeant there, an instructor in various and sundry skills, plans and training, non-commissioned officer, and various other specialties, but my basic position was platoon sergeant and a buck sergeant level, that is 3 stripers. Mm-hmm. Then I had an ambition, latent all the way through, about wanted to get into the so-called ski troops, having been a student at Florence University in northern Wisconsin. And having graduated there, I had some experience with skiing and watching skiing and immersed in winter activity. So I really had a yen for that, and I put in for that in the latter days of my staying at Camp Grant, and was accepted. And in October 1943, I was shipped off to Camp Hale, Colorado, that notorious place up in the Central Rockies. That same year, I was married, as a matter of fact, to my sweetheart of several years. And we went our separate ways, however, because of the extenuating circumstances of war. But I found myself at Camp Hale in the fall of 1943 as a medical person. They didn't have any room on the medicals in the medics there, but they did in the infantry parts. So they put me in an infantry company F of the 3rd Battalion of the 85th Regiment as a sergeant. And coming in with that rank, of course, I was in above a lot of other people, but I didn't know how to shoot a rifle or a machine gun or a mortar or anything like that. I'd been trained in medical work, and they gave us close order drill. We were very good at that, but did not know the manual of arms or weapons or anything like that. So I had to sort of start from scratch there with some recruits out on the rifle range, learning basic rifle assembly and handling and machine guns and so on. So I became an expert, instead of at healing, at killing. You might say, not a very good transfer of training, but it was an interesting experience, and I was right where I wanted to be, up at Camp Hale, about 9,000 feet in the Rockies, and I liked winter sports, and of course that wasn't a bed of roses up there either, as you may have heard. But I was soon placed in as a squad leader in, I think it was 2nd Platoon of Company B, Company F, I should say, and sort of learned from scratch as a squad leader with about 8 or 10 men under me in all sorts of techniques of warfare, especially mountain warfare. We went through various maneuvers of one kind or another and training sessions. And the winter came on, and we learned how to ski. Some of us who really needed to, and spent a lot of time, spare time, on the training hills nearby at off times, but training there too. We spent a good deal of time out in the mountains in the snow. One of the strange things about it was that every once in a while we were in barracks, about nightfall, the company commander would order us all out into the woods to sleep for the night. Just suddenly we'd grab our sleeping bags and packs and move out into the surrounding areas and spend the night out in the snow. So they were toughening us up in various ways. Ultimately, I became a platoon sergeant. And that enabled me to get my squad leader rank was I forget the name of the sergeant at that level. It's a 4-striper, 3 stripes with 1 arc beneath. And as technical sergeant, I had one additional arc, so I had 5 stripes. And that put me in charge of a platoon as a platoon sergeant. By that time, I knew my stuff pretty well and could handle just about anything that came along. And from then on, it was a matter of training, various exercises in the field, and head work in the inside and technical work. I'd been trained in judo, the art of unarmed combat, before I came there. As a matter of fact, while I was in the medics, I was trained in judo, and I became an instructor in judo for Camp Grant, and did a lot of training work there. And when I got to Camp Hale, I was tabbed to do further training in judo, unarmed combat, which was an interesting thing to learn to do too. So I was instructing in various things along the side, as well as being a platoon sergeant and handling the work of being a sergeant in a weapon in an armed platoon. Well, nothing too unusual about that. I went through it with everybody else, and ultimately, for the next winter, during that first winter, we were involved in a series of training sessions, ultimately ending up with the whole division up about 10, 11,000 feet, 12,000 feet above sea level in deep snows in the heart of winter. It was about February or early March then, and the snows had become, pardon?
Of what year?
That was 44. I came in 43 and fall of 43 and spring of early year 44. Around the 1st of March, we were high in the mountains there for 2 weeks solid, with deep snows, low temperatures, high altitudes, and an impossible fighting situation. If we'd had to fight in those conditions, nobody would have accomplished anything. We were barely able to keep ourselves alive. But we managed, most of us, and it was a good toughening experience, and we knew what we could do and what we couldn't do. And so we felt well trained by the time spring came along. And then they shipped us off of all places, as you may have heard from others, down to Texas, East Texas, near at Camp Swift, the very, very opposite of where we'd been. And none of us could figure out what was going on there. I mean, it was the hottest time of the year that we got down there. We spent the summer steaming ourselves away through that area. And doing all sorts of the usual training things, drill, and taking 20-mile forced marches in weather close to 100 degrees. We figured they were going to send us to the mountains, some desert mountain area where it was hot, but we didn't know where the dickens we were going. We knew it would probably be mountains and rough terrain. So that was a strange experience. While I was there, one of the things they did, of course, was to add a weapons platoon or weapons company to each of the companies of the 10th Division. So that was a great expansion of the personnel as well as the weaponry that we had. Heretofore, we didn't have the heavy weapons units. So to our unit, our unit was, let's see, E, F, G, and H. H was the new company, the heavy weapons company with 4 heavy machine guns and 4 heavy mortars, and all of the accoutrements that go with it, and the training in pack mules to carry the stuff. And we had about 3,000 mules attached to us there. My experience there led to another interesting involvement, and that is, as they were forming H Company, they needed a new first sergeant, as well as a cadre of non-coms and others. So I was tabbed by the battalion level to be the acting, at least the first sergeant of that company. So I went there and spent about a month helping to get that organization up and running, doing the work of a company sergeant, which is a kind of a high-class secretary kind of job, keeping records, getting people to do various assignments of one kind or another, from KP to taking care of the mules and all the other things, barracks orderly and so on. And that was an interesting experience, and I found that I was able to handle it pretty well, but it was quite a shift of what I'd been doing. Now, I had graduated from college before I came into the Army, so I had a bachelor's degree, and I got it in philosophy and religion. And I might add to that, back when I was classified at the center where I was brought into the Army, reception center, the classification officer, after looking at my information, said, "Well, I see you are a major in philosophy." I said, "Yes, I majored in philosophy." He said, "Well, you know, in the Army, you can only use that for consolation." I said, "Yes, that's what I expect to use it for." So I was classified as a clerk, first class, because I knew how to run a typewriter. That's great Army work, you know. But then I was shipped off with all these other fellows to the medics because they needed a bunch of warm bodies there. I decided that despite my college degree that I wanted to go in as a private. I didn't want to get at the officer level because I wanted to be engaged at the level where the real grunt work, the boots on the ground work is being done, and not be separated by the artificial rank of officer. And the non-commissioned officers were right there, of course, with the boys, with their men too. I mean, they were at the same level within the structure. So just sort of a preview of how I got where I got in some ways, and why I never became an officer, but I could have been. And actually, while at Camp Grant, in order to get on with my being in the Army, I did take some work in a sort of a local OCS programs they had set up there for those aspiring to become officers. I thought if I could become an officer, then I could get into the ski troops through that. So I was taking that along with everything else I was doing, and learning basic rifle techniques. So I knew a little bit about it by the time I got in the infantry. But that sort of petered out in time, and then the call to go into the ski troops came, and that was a volunteer organization then. So it was quite an exceptional group of people. Our first sergeant was a Harvard graduate, and the very idea of a first sergeant in the infantry being a college graduate and a Harvard graduate was just out of this world. Of course, there were a lot of people there who'd been in college, or were going to college, or aspiring to college, because of the kind of thing they were looking for. People who know how to ski, and a lot of the Easterners, the preppies, knew how to ski. So we got a lot of them in too. The people from socioeconomic level, which was a little bit above that of the Army, generally speaking. So our volunteer group at first was of that nature, and quite an interesting bunch of people. Later on, it was added to by anybody that could get moved in. That when I was forming H Company, they were bringing just basic recruits in from all over without any regard for skiing. Of course, we were in the flatlands, so who needed skis or snowshoes down there? So that was the nature of our organization. And I worked, getting back to the story, I was with H Company for about, maybe a couple of months. And then it was getting into the fall then. We were shaping up towards some kind of an overseas assignment that we didn't know about. Nobody knew in the world where we were going. By that time, the Normandy invasion had taken place, and they were beginning to move across Europe. And the end of Germany seemed to be in sight, but there was an awful lot of fighting left to do. And so with regard to my position at H Company, as we neared the time of shipping out, some guy from up in battalion headquarters who had a little bit more pull than I did was assigned to the job of first sergeant of H Company, and I was returned to F Company. By that time, my position as a rifle platoon sergeant had been taken by another, but there was an opening at the in the weapons platoon for a company for a platoon sergeant, and so I was assigned to that. Well, that was another new experience to me because I wasn't all that good at machine guns and mortars. The fact is, I wasn't qualified for either, and yet all the people under me were. So that was a new learning experience for me, but I'd been part of the company, and I knew a lot of them, and they knew me, and it was no problem to adjust to the general situation, but I found myself somewhat like a fish out of water. But by that time, the squads under me had been so well trained that you could sort of sit back and let them do. All you had to do is generally put them in a position, and they would take it from there. The mortars doing their work, and we had 2 machine guns and 3 mortars, and squads, and those fellows really knew their stuff. Each one of those squads was under a section leader for the machine guns, and a section leader for the mortars. So that was another level of administration that took care of them pretty well too. And I was above them, so I really didn't need to know my stuff as well as I might have. And I felt pretty good about that because these guys knew what they were doing, and I sort of learned from them too along the way. And of course the company, the platoon commander, being an officer, had a good grip on that too, and we had a very unusually good one. Lieutenant Hanks, who was a sort of a taciturn, tough little guy. No monkey business, just good straight working. He was a master, good man to have. And once again, that level took care of a lot of the administration. So in some ways, I felt like a fifth wheel at times. But I had my work cut out for me. I had to sort of be their dean, you might say, and so on. And so I carried on that way. Then we were shipped overseas in December. I don't know how far you want me to go with that, but I can carry right on through.
In terms of where you served, exactly.
Yeah. We were sent to Italy. We didn't really know we were there until we got there, practically. They shipped us across. We went over in the U.S., the old, let's see, what was the name of that ship? It was the largest, the American fleet of passenger ships of the day, the last and the only one to be so large. And I think we had our almost all of our whole battalion was there, and maybe another battalion, I'm not sure, but it was.
So how many men approximately on the ship?
That would be hard to say. I would say maybe about 5,000 packed in, rank on rank. I mean, stacked up bunks. It was really rough. But F Company got a good deal out of that. We were assigned the job, I don't know why, but happily, to be sort of the guards for the whole ship. So we got very good assignments. We were the rest of the guys were just sitting there most of the time. We were busy with sort of overseeing things, administering the locations and seeing that order was kept. And we had a regular guard duty situation where we were on for 8 hours and off for the next 16, and so on, rotating through regular guard operations. And we were able to get especially good quarters because of that, and we had a sort of edge on the food too, and the freedom of the ship, which the others didn't have. So our company was selected for some reason to do that job, and it was an interesting piece of work to do. Sort of gave us something to do while we were being shipped overseas. Well, we got into Naples. when we got into the Mediterranean, we knew we were heading for some place probably having to do with the Alps or northern Italy or somewhere in there where the fighting was still going on. And we landed at Naples, which was badly beaten up, walked off our ship onto a walkway that went across the side of a sunken freighter and onto another one, and then on the shore, using these sunken ships as kind of docks, because the place had been badly damaged. We were there for just a short while, and then we were shipped north on an landing ship for troops, LST, landing ship troops. Smaller craft, about a company on each, I think. No, about a battalion on each, I think it was. At any rate, they were loaded, and we were just sitting around on the decks and whiling away our time as we sailed up the Italian coast. It was early January, but Mediterranean is pretty kind to you in January, and we had an interesting little cruise up there. Meanwhile, some of our boys were a little hungry, and they got into the food locker, there, swiping a couple of hams. So we were able to catch some food on the way that the Navy had stashed away, and they didn't know that we left that we'd gotten it. At any rate, the guys were always looking for angles on things, and they were very ingenious. They were very intelligent people, canny. At any rate, we landed at Leghorn near Pisa, and went ashore there, and went into bivouac with our shelter halves lined up, squared up underneath the big Italian stone pines in some hunting park that some wealthy person had, and hung around there for a few days. And then they transferred us up into a little hill town on the southern flanks of the Apennine Mountains, mountain town. Beautiful, interesting old place. And we took over a school there for our battalion. I think our company took that. It was a company town, yeah. And the various other companies were stashed in other little towns nearby. And so there began a period of about a month of our sort of getting adjusted to the climate. It wasn't too bad. There was some snow there, but it wasn't a rough winter. Doing some scouting work, sending out groups to find out where the Germans were and what they were up to. I went on one which went to the highest peak in the Apennine Mountains, Monte Della Spe, and skis were really not used at all over there, interestingly enough, and even climbing crampons and other techniques. Our company was never in that sort of thing, but going to the top of that peak, it was snow-covered, and it was getting over toward the spring of the year, and it was getting hard and crusty. So we could walk up that hill pretty well, over to the top where we could look down at the German positions, and they could look up at us, and nothing really happened, but we took our looks, and then we came down. We had a great time coming down. We just laid on our backs, pulled up our parkas behind us, brought our feet up under us, and skidded down, slid down on our back, just shushing down there and stopping ourselves by digging our heels in. It was a real neat exit from that position, and but it was totally uneventful for the group I was with, but some had some pretty tough engagements doing that, and ready to run into some Germans and had to fight a bit, and a few guys were lost, I understand. None in our company, though. So we whiled away our time there, and went down to, had some leaves there that took us to some interesting places while we were sitting around. I went off to Florence, which was a place I had looked forward to getting to for years. I'd been a student of humanities and art also, as well in philosophy. And this, of course, was the key locus of the Renaissance. And I had a great experience there. The only trouble was they'd put all the art away. The art museums were empty. The only thing that were there were the buildings, but the buildings themselves were really very, very much a part of the Renaissance. So I had a good experience visiting them, and the wall paintings were there. They couldn't take them down. The doors of the baptistry had been removed, though, the famous Ghiberti doors, and so I didn't see them. But it was just a delightful experience. I walked down the street near where Dante lived, and walked across the Ponte Vecchio, an ancient bridge across the Po with shops all along the sides. And just an idyllic kind of experience, which really I needed and I thrived on. And then back to the back to the schoolhouse and sleeping on a cement floor, trying to get some heat out of a stubborn Italian stove with wet hickory wood, which didn't do very well, but it gave the thought of it anyway. And so finally we were mustered into action late February, and we didn't know quite where we were going, but then we began to learn that it was Mount Belvedere, which was the key to the so-called Gothic Line that the Germans held across the Apennine Mountains, south of the Po Valley. And their command of that ridge, as well as that mountaintop, as well as the ridge beyond it and to the west, a high escarpment, some 300 or 400 feet of sheer, almost sheer cliff, but very loose rock, from which they could get observation on everything that moved out there coming toward them, so they could get artillery fire, mortar fire, and all sorts of pre-advice about who's coming from where. That had to be taken, that ridge, in order to get Belvedere, in order to get us up on Belvedere. Then the famous Riva Ridge night attack took place. We were sitting down in the valley below Mount Belvedere waiting for our orders to go. And we didn't quite realize that the Riva Ridge thing was going on, but we knew something was going to have to be done to eliminate that ridgetop. And it was a company from the 3rd Platoon, I think, that went up and did that. And they climbed at night, took the top. Quite a remarkable story. I've only read about it, so I don't know firsthand what happened, but it was a remarkable achievement. And the one place where our mountain training really paid off, because not only did this unit go up in about 4 different places at night with the minimum of fastened ropes in cold weather with a certain amount of ice and snow connected with it, and get to the top without the Germans realizing it. But having gotten there, then of course the problem is, how do you resupply a unit like that that's so out of touch? Well, the engineers came to work to the rescue, and they had learned, of course, in mountain engineering, you have a tramway established on a cable that stretches from down in the valley to the top of the mountain, and you run a cable along that pulls a container, a hanging unit that holds things up to the top, and then you bring stuff down, and you shuttle that thing back and forth about as fast as you can. You take the ammunition and food up, and you bring the wounded and the dead back down, and this thing shuttles back and forth. No way in the world could they have held that mountaintop without the work of the engineers, and they were superbly trained in this, and so we learned something from them too. Well, the Riva Ridge was taken, and then we went into action on Belvedere, and that was our first our baptism of fire for our company. And I can remember that morning early, as we were getting lined up along the trail going up to the top. The 87th had already sent some units up there to make the first attack, and we were to follow them through and carry on across the ridge toward Mount Della Torraccia and Mount Terminale. And as we were waiting to go up, we had our usual camaraderie was as live as ever, and people were just like a bunch of Boy Scouts on a on a camping trip, and we were sitting along the trail waiting for our words to go up. And down the trail came two or three mules, led by the Alpini, the Italian mountain troops who had by that long since capitulated, and they were working for us now. They did our mule work, fortunately. We didn't have to worry about the mules. And on each one of those mules was a GI, draped over like a log of wood. And suddenly, there was a vast change in all of us. And we said, holy smoke, there goes someone that could have been me. And so we suddenly saw for the first time the effects of a combat involvement. And soon later, a little later, we were heading up the hill, realizing that it could be us. Well, we got up there on top and we saw a few others that were lying dead. And there was some artillery coming in because the Germans knew exactly where we were. They'd been there. They'd had that mountain. And they were driven off, or being in the process of driven off. So we worked our way along the ridge. There were some units out ahead of us that were doing some more fighting we hadn't gotten into yet. We spent the night in the pine woods along the crest of that Mount Belvedere, and that was a hellish experience because the Germans knew we were there, and they were sending their 88 millimeter shots right into the pine trees above us, exploding and smashing down trees and branches and shrapnel all over us. And it was a horrendous experience. And one thing I'll remember, Lieutenant Hanks, boy, he was a rock of Gibraltar in this. That he just wandered about, finding out where we were and being sure we were okay. And I don't think he ever slept that night. The rest of us were hunkered down in our holes or trying to dig deeper. And my machine guns and my mortars had been positioned by Hanks. And so I was sort of working with him on that. And but we got through the night, and not too many of our men were wounded, but some were. I don't know that we lost any at that point, but moving on the next day, we lost some people. And as platoon sergeant, I was sort of bringing up the rear. The platoon leader was out ahead, and our platoon was always broken up and put in various other places around our positions, whereas rifle platoons were strung out together, side by side, elbow to elbow. We were here and here and here and here, and the machine guns on the flanks firing across our front, the mortars back in behind ready to drop, and zeroed in on the positions beyond us as we moved. So our people were scattered from our platoon. The rest were sort of units. And they moved that way too, and we moved in pieces, but I was bringing up the rear. And I came upon, as nightfall came on that second day, one of the greatest guys I've ever known. He was in our platoon. He was a runner, Warren Steiner, and he had been hit and was lying there in the trail on his back. And he wasn't dead, but he was near. And he was he was about as close a friend as I had in the unit at that point. Because we, being separate people in a sense, we often bunked together. And there he was. And I had to keep moving though, and we just moved on by him. And that evening, as we went into position on the following crest, I felt constrained to go back and check him. And so I went back in the dark down the trail. I took my life in my hands because I was going beyond the company perimeter, and the Germans were just over the ridge, and I could have been easily knocked down there. And they were throwing artillery around too again still. I went down, and I got. It was a very moving experience, as you might imagine.
Pick that up again for me.
Yeah.
James, you leave your company.
Yes, the company had.
Your feeling is it? It's not guilt, certainly, that you had to leave him behind.
Well, no, because that's the way things were. But I had a particular interest in that fellow, and I felt he shouldn't be left alone to die. So, once the company was in position and our machine guns and mortars had been positioned, I decided to go back and check on Steiner. And I was able to follow the trail down because we were not far above him. And he was located fairly close to an old stone building, just a little place that had been sort of beaten up. So I knew the identity of where he was. I could find him in the dusk and in the light. Interestingly enough, we did all our work under lights because they had learned that by playing searchlights, our people, on the clouds above, that we reflect down on the earth below and sort of be a twilight, a constant twilight, as long as there were clouds up above. And there usually were low clouds at night. So there was this dim light that shone over everything. And I was able to find my way back, and I found Steiner. He was still alive. I understood that someone had said they'd injected him with morphine so that he wasn't really feeling anything. And so I knew that he was sort of beyond contact. But I held him until he died. And I laid him back down in the snow. Went on my way.
How long were you able to hold him?
Oh, half hour maybe. Maybe an hour, I don't know. Time was hard to judge. Well, I left him lying in the snow and started back to the company. Well,
did he sense your presence at all, do you think?
Pardon?
Did he sense your presence at all?
I don't think he did. I think he was, they injected him with morphine, and they did him pretty hard, I think, just to be sure, because he'd suffered, I think, a terrible wound in his spine and back, and he was just, there was no hope for him at all. And he was lying face up, but the word had gotten out that he'd been hit in the back. So he passed on, and I went back toward the company. But the problem there was that the company had its own circle around it, you might say, of protection, and there was a password you needed to know to get in, and I didn't know the password. So I decided, well, I better not try to get into the company circle, because I don't know the password and they might hit me before I get a chance to let them know who I was. So there were a bunch of big old chestnut trees on the hillside there, big chestnut forests all over the place. Some big hollow trees there, centuries old probably. And I found one with a big hole in it and some sawdust, and I climbed in there and spent the night, the rest of the night sleeping in that hollow tree. The next morning with visibility, I went up and joined the company. And so that incident had ended in that way. But having been in position without any particular call for my presence, I didn't feel I was letting them down by going back for Steiner. But I felt that was an important thing to do, and I did it. And it was something I'd never forgotten. After the war, I went to see his wife, told her about him, up in Minneapolis, I believe. So that sort of brought it to closure, but it was a hard thing to do. At any rate, I joined the company again, and we carried the fight on. Later that morning, I was lying under a tree at a ridge, looking over toward the German position, hunkered down there in the grass, where, quote, they couldn't see us, but they did. They knew where we were. And I was lying there with my mortar section leader, Giddix. We were trying to check on where some sites might be for a good barrage of mortar fire. And the Germans got there first. They lobbed a mortar into the tree above us. And suddenly there was a huge explosion. And a limb fell on me. But Giddix was hit terribly bad, and we were lying side by side. It could have been me. his left hand was taken practically off. He was looking through binoculars, and that left-handed binocular was smashed to pieces. But we tied him up as best we could. He had a wound in his buttocks and the leg, and we got him down to where the medics could take him on. And but I was totally unscathed. The branch didn't hit me all that hard. It was leaves and so on, crash. But I took that old the binocular, and had them cut the left side off, and I have the monocular now, one eye. I still have that, and that's a recollection of that. Where Giddings was he was out of the fight though, because his left hand had been totally taken off. Well, those things happen, and somehow I was spared. And a little later, we were relieved by an outfit from E Company, and taken back to rest and recapitulation and repersonalizing. We had to get a lot of new people in our platoon. I think about 1/3 of our platoon was killed or wounded, and that's about 8 or 10 men. And so we needed some new people. And
the extent of your injury from the branch was minimal.
Nothing. I was untouched. It was remarkable because it was a shell burst with shrapnel. For some reason, it missed me, but got him, and we were just side by side. So that was a. I felt like I don't know. I'd been spared for something, and so I was able to carry on. We went back to rest, and it was there that a group of recruits came, among them John Koski, who we've been celebrating here, and we needed 8 or 10 men in the platoon, basic people, and some of our leaders had been knocked off too. I think both of our section leaders were gone, and almost all of our squad leaders were wounded and no longer with us. So we had to sort of bring people up from lower positions, but they were well trained. They could step right in. They were trained to do that. So we had a whole new set of people across the board. There are 2 new section leaders and about 4 or 5 new squad leaders, and but they knew what they were doing, and the new recruits were brought in, and they were mainly ammo carriers in their original assignments, so they didn't have any high responsibilities. And so they came in. John Koski was one of these people. And I don't know whether you were at that meeting the other night when I told about him, but I never knew him, because you just don't get to know people unless they're intimately involved in a squad situation. And that was one of the things that I did not experience as a platoon sergeant. I was not part of a team. Each of these units, the machine gunners, the mortar people, were team units that worked together like machinery. I mean, they knew what they were doing. They were from the squad leader on down and the section leader. And everybody was integrated into that. And they worked together, they slept together, they dug their foxholes near each other, they manned their weapons shoulder to shoulder. So, but I'd never had that experience in the combat situation. It was sort of an unusual predicament to be in, but I was sort of supervising them or working with them here and there to help them develop their positions better, as may be. And it was at that point that because of the great loss of officers in that Belvedere experience, a lot of officers in our battalion got lost. Each company lost almost all of their officers. That's about 5 people. We lost. I don't think we lost any officers. But because we had our officers, they shipped some of ours off to others' company, and Lieutenant Hanks was sent to E Company, I believe, or maybe G, I'm not sure. So they appointed me acting platoon leader. So I was taking over the position of an officer, a commissioned officer. And I was in that position from the end of Belvedere to almost the beginning of our last push from Della Spe, a whole month. And so I was running the platoon as an officer, and one of my section leaders was acting platoon sergeant. So everybody moves up a rank and takes over, and things move along. And we, in those intervening weeks, occupied, I think our longest occupation was up on Mount Della Castellana, which was high above, very, very up high in the Apennines, and looked down on the little town of Casteldano and other positions that we were holding. And I had a pretty good deal there because as a acting officer, I was able to occupy the company bunker, which was an old dugout that the Germans had built for us and that we took over and improved. Had bunks in it and really had a very nice log roof and sandbags over it about 3 feet deep. So we were well protected. So I occupied that, and I was an acting platoon leader for about a month there, and then we shipped back for a rest and regeneration. Then they shipped us up to Della Spe, which was right out at the point of our position, hard hit area, just beaten up. And our company, another company had been in there, and our company pulled in as they pulled out, and we occupied all their places. And just before that, a new officer had been assigned to my platoon, so I reverted to platoon sergeant and so on down the line. So in that position, we were lined up to hold it as well as to prepare for the final push in March. My dating is not as clear as it might be. I don't remember these dates. But the story goes on to the point where we were occupying Della Spe for several weeks, it seems. And then time for the push came, and some of us had been sent back. I got sent back again. I revisited Florence, got back down to earth, and had that experience to relive. And then we came back up. We also went to Bagni di Lucca and had hot baths and all sorts of interesting things. At any rate, we finally were in position on Della Spe for the final push, and that first day out, our company was, of course, our platoon, as usual, was strung out because they had to be in various positions. I was bringing up the rear, and we got down in the valley there, and it was just being beaten up by mortars, and the Germans, once again, knew exactly where we were. They were all zeroed in on us. And it was there that I took a hit in the shoulder. And I went back to to an aid station that was set up in an old stone building back about 100 yards behind us, down in the valley there, to get something to put on. I didn't have any bandage or anything. And they tagged me and shipped me back. They wouldn't let me go back to my position. I said, hey, do you want to go back there? I mean, I'm platoon sergeant. Said, no, you can't. You stay here. And they made me stay, and they shipped me back to the hospital. And I really wasn't in all that bad shape, but they nailed me on it. And having been a medic, I know what medics had to do, and you should really do what they tell you, and that was it. So at that point, I left the fight. And what happened from then on was somebody else's story. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until after they'd crossed the Po Valley, the Po River, some 5 or 6 days later, that I finally caught up with the company. I got back to the hospital, and they held us there for several days, and several other F Company people were there, and we decided, we're going back to F Company. We don't care where they send us, but we're going back to F Company, and they're out there ahead somewhere. So we started off grabbing rides on trucks and anything else going that way. Meanwhile, the division had gotten into the Po Valley and had spearheaded the drive toward the Po Valley, toward the Po River. It was just an amazing achievement, and we missed that. We were sort of catching up with them, and we hiked and we biked and we grabbed rides in cars and whatever. We slept a couple of nights in barns on the way and got food from local local farmers so we didn't starve. And finally we got to the Po River, and by that time the company was on the other side. So we went across, there were about 3 or 4 of us, I guess, that were sort of working together. So we got a ride on a duck, amphibian truck, which were crossing the Po River carrying loads of ammunition back over and other things back. And so we rode over on an ammunition load, a duck loaded with ammunition, and hoping that we wouldn't sustain some kind of a hit, because it did. We'd all been gone. But we got across and soon found the company, and I was back with the boys again. But I missed that whole drive down through the Apennines to Bologna and beyond. And that's somebody else's history, but that's been well recapitulated by others. And John Koski was killed, I think, on the second day out of that. I was hit on the first, and he was killed on the second, when they were struggling to take those hills out there. And so I know about where and when he was.
He was a mortar guy or a machine gunner?
He was a mortar man. He joined the mortar squad, and we were shifting around a bit, and because of the losses here and there of our leadership in platoon, in the squads, they were shifted around and to replace each other by experience, so that you'd have each mortar squad would have some very experienced men in it, because the experienced men of the other mortar squad had been decimated or been unable to finish. But people like Koski came in essentially as ammo carriers, and they carried three cartridges in the front and 3 in the back on a sling that went across over their shoulders. And that was their main job, to get the ammunition up there. And those were heavy loads too. They were 81. We were firing 81 millimeter short sawed-off mortars, which were terrible things. And we should have been only firing 60 millimeter mortars, not so big. We were firing things that big. And every time they went off, they practically destroyed our squads. They had to get down low. But they certainly delivered a punch, and the guys worked them very well. But John was an ammo carrier, and he was until the end, because the law situation wasn't such that he was needed to take over, and he wasn't really trained to do that either. He would have had to learn a lot all of a sudden. So he was, as the narrative goes, as I've heard it from Winterbottom, who was one of my squad leaders, and he has a great story to tell, and he may have told it already. Winterbottom was a very aggressive and very fine soldier, and he really took things in his hands, and he drew Koski along with him as he moved. And Koski was really, really doing his job well, and he was hit. And there are others that can tell that incident much better than I. But as I've said several times, I never knew him until I came here, where I've suddenly discovered not only him, but a family and an ethnic and a place and a whole new world, you might say, of that lies behind a person, which lies behind every one of us when people really get to know us. But the experience of being here and seeing all that lies behind this one guy who came in as a replacement, what lay behind him, it's just been a phenomenal thing to experience. These guys were in a tough spot. These replacements, because they came. They were unhooked. They were unassigned. They were unattached, sort of, and it wasn't their fault. They were assigned this. They were assigned to be replacements. So they came up and fitted in wherever they could to units that are already going concerns, and they had to be drawn in and become part of these, and so it was a challenge to face what soldiers have to face when you have not really been part of a unit, where your brotherhood has not been established.
Sure.
And I can't imagine a more difficult situation to be in. Senator Bob Dole was in this situation. He came in as a replacement officer right after Belvedere, I believe. A raw lieutenant, never been in service, never been in battle, assigned to a platoon leader's job, which was a heck of a job. Under fire, it's a terrible job because you've got to be out there in front. And he was hit in his first day of combat off of Della Spe. And or second day, right in there. And nearly died, but he came through it. But I can't imagine a tougher spot to be in than what he was in.
So you catch up with your company? Is
Yeah.
fighting for the most part done by now?
Yeah, it's pretty well done. The Germans have, see, racing to the Po Valley, we cut off all their abilities to get across the river. Bridges were blown up. There were no ferries that would work. I mean, they were stopped. We left thousands of troops, German troops, south of the Po Valley, but north of the Po Valley there were others. And they were surrendering by hundreds. By the time I got there, the surrender had been pretty well achieved, and there were other units though out farther ahead retreating into the Alps, and our group was sent up the shores of Lake Garda, one of the most beautiful lakes in Italy, to support another unit that had gone on ahead to try to catch the Germans at the other end of the lake. And the Germans in retreating had blown up the bridges. There were maybe a half a dozen bridges, tunnels, short tunnels along the steep side of the lake there, so that they were held up and had to get over them or around them in any way as they could. And we were in support of that. We were not at the point at that stage of the game, but we got to Malcation, which is partway up the lake, and occupied a schoolhouse there, and we're ready to move if need be. And about that time, the Germans capitulated, and it was all over. And our fighting was done. And there remained only then to be the matter of occupation and mopping up. And one of the most interesting events of that occurred as we were sent from where we were on Lake Garda up to Bolzano, which is well up toward the Brenner Pass, which is the main passageway between Germany, Austria, and Italy, which had been just blasted to pieces by bombers. I mean, it was practically impassable. But we were sent up to secure that area anyway, because Germans were retreating in that direction, had been. But the war had ended, and when they sent us up there, we were sent up to sort of occupy, get our boots on the ground there. And as we were going north in trucks up the mountain road toward the Brenner Pass, at various places you see these large groups of German troops loaded to the hip, armed to the teeth, with all their weapons, waving at us, and we waving back and saying, boy, we sure hope nothing goes wrong now, because we were totally outnumbered and outgunned. But they had capitulated, and they were just waiting to be rounded up and disarmed. And we got to Bolzano and de-trucked there and took over an old German, what the Germans had occupied, a barracks there, which had been an Italian barracks originally. The Germans had been occupying it, and they of course had to leave and go elsewhere. But standing in front of the entrance to that barracks was a German soldier with his helmet on, his uniform, his burp gun strung across his chest, standing there sort of on guard. And we said, what in the heck is this guy doing here on guard? Who's he guarding? We're in charge now. But he stood there And we just walked by him and occupied the place, and he stood there. I took a picture of him standing there in front of our barracks. The war was over. And here he was standing there with this, somebody had assigned him this job, and he was, by golly, going to stay there till he was told otherwise. Well, he ultimately disappeared. I think he got the word maybe, but it was so interesting to see our barracks guarded by a German, loaded, armed to the teeth. And so we were there for several days, and then they shipped us off toward the eastern part of Italy to form a presence there so that Tito didn't get any bright ideas about taking any of eastern Italy north of Venice. And so we were in several positions there. And it was during that time, of course, with the war ended in our place. And it wasn't too long after that the war in Europe ended, because by the time we got going in the Apennines and Po Valley, they were already pushing into Germany and taking over large areas there. And the doom of Berlin had been sealed. The Russians were coming in from the east, and it was just all but over, and then it ended. And we were just occupying troops then. And it was an interesting time to be. We got into various activities. I happened to be a track person in college, so the powers that be decided they should have a track meet. And they had tennis meet, and they had swimming meet and other things. But track was my sport, so I got on I went to the 5th Army track meet, and I won some positions there, and got integrated into what became the 5th Army track team. And I was put on detached service with the 5th Army track team to compete with other units of other countries and so on in the Mediterranean area with the Italians. And I was sent to Milan, the major, the Detroit of northern Italy, you might say. Great city. Had been pretty well left alone, though. They hadn't been bombed too badly. We had the tough assignment of living in a hotel there, eating in a nearby restaurant, a ristorante, and each day working out at a local track to shape ourselves up, and we'd have meets almost every weekend with somebody. I was the pole vaulter. I also did some jumping and hurdling. So that went on for about a month. That was a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it couldn't have been better because...
So where were you when you heard about the war has officially ended? Tell me that story.
The whole war, or the war in Europe?
The war in Europe, where you're...
Yeah. I think we were at Lake Garda at that point. We were still in the position to move toward the upper end of the lake at Riva, but other units had gotten there, and we were sort of in reserve. And I think it was while we were there, and I don't remember the date. It was early May. We got the word that it was all over.
And what about the whole war?
The whole war, we were in the middle of the Atlantic. No, we were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean coming back. Yeah, on the troop transport, deck loaded. They didn't have the room for us under the deck, so we were sleeping on the deck in drizzles and whatever, and we were about halfway over the Atlantic when we heard the atomic bomb had been dropped, the first one, Hiroshima. And the word was that this was quite a moving experience, that it was going to have the Japanese sit up and take notice. And so that we were being sent back to be given some time off and then to be recycled to Japan to do some mountain work there, no doubt. But so we knew that we were headed for the Pacific ultimately. Then we came ashore. Let's see, it was a week or two later, maybe 2 weeks. I don't remember when that second one was dropped. But I think we were sent on, we were shipped out to on leave from that camp in New York there. And I don't know whether it happened there or while we were on leave that the second bomb was dropped, and then the capitulation came very shortly thereafter. And suddenly we knew it was all over. And we ended up out at Camp Carson, Colorado, and it was there that we were held until we were discharged. And I was discharged in October. I went in October of 1941, came out in October of 1945.
Life changed forever.
Yeah. Life changed forever, but it was quite an experience, and one, I suppose in some ways I say I would not have missed, but one I couldn't have missed either, being eligible for draft. And it was a major turning point in my life in many ways in terms of maturing and understanding and getting down to earth, being exposed to the worst and in some cases the best.
How did the soldiers deal with all the carnage, the ongoing carnage?
Stoically, for the most part. I mean, you try to tough it through. And everybody is scared to death and trying to look for his own hide, as well as, of course, he has to look for the others too, because they're part of units. My own experience was as I've reported, and I'm sure others had the same experiences of one kind or another. We fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, I don't know, we were in action only a short time compared with most units. But for the time we were in, I think we had more casualties for the time we were actually in service. Ours was a short spell of fighting and carnage, and so we weren't worn down as some of the units like the 35th Division, which had fought its way all up the boot of Italy, Monte Cassino, and the landings, and boy, they had just been through hell for months, it seems. We had a relatively short run, violent but short. And so in my own experience, of course, I didn't experience that last drive fully as I might have, and that might have changed my point of view on things too. But and a lot of our fellows were hurt. They were killed. Our company commander was wounded, and a lot of our guys were lost. But as I say, I think it's the continuity of these experiences that really drives people crazy and wears them down. I think of a guy like Oscar Koski, who was the navigator in B-17, in action for a number of months, going out every few days without any of the slightest possibility possibly of coming back. You know, you're sitting duck up there and yet coming back and going out again. And that continuity of wearing a person down over week after week, that would be a tough thing to take. I hand it to him for getting through that in one piece. Ours was short, violent, and relatively brief in terms of most battles. So the shock of the thing was, of course, very difficult to take, but you just did your darndest and held on and worked with your unit and hoped you'd make it.
Is there anything else, I guess, that you'd like to add, because you covered most of the questions?
Yeah, I've been sort of wandering on and on here. Well, I think I've given you the basic flavor and the basic take I had on things. I haven't been as sharp in details as I might have been, but I'm not as sharp with anything as I was, as I used to be. So I've let some of those details slip, but I've gone through the major aspects.
You were, because of your injury, you weren't involved in Della Tarraccia.
Oh yeah. Della Tarraccia occurred. See, our push from Della Spe took time, a long time after Della Tarraccia. Della Tarraccia was the end of Belvedere, and that was the point where I told you about the branch falling on me and Giddicks being wiped out. We were pulled back about a day later and replaced by another unit, and then they went on and took Della Tarraccia. Though we were facing that and didn't get there. Now we took Della Castellana later on. That was a relatively brief and short-run campaign without much action, without much German fire. Relatively easy, but we didn't do the Castellana thing. We fell short of that, as I recall. Yeah, well, looking back on it, I guess I have to say that it was something that needed to be done. It's 4 years out of my life. I think it was a very, very maturing and seasoning experience, which I wouldn't wish on anybody, but which I wish a lot of people would have. The status of being in the armed services is itself a trying experience, one you have to really weather, and a very maturing experience if you handle it right. I would wish that every young guy could get an experience like that at some point. Maybe not as long as mine, maybe not as bad as mine, but with that kind of a disciplinary shaping up experience. And I found it to be that, although I already had some of those virtues, I think, but they needed to be seasoned out and worked into shape. And as I look at the soldier now, a soldier does what he has to do. You don't blame the soldier for anything that happens because he's doing it because he's been told to do it. He's been trained to do it, and that's his job. Sometimes you go overboard and you do more than you should do. You do some terrible things. I don't think I ever killed a man because I was never in a position to do it. But my people did. And I never came face to face with a German combat. I was always on the other end of a machine gun or a mortar. But that's a terrible experience to kill a person, and a lot of our guys had to do that. But it's part of the seasoning of it. But I felt that it was not a waste of time. It had to be done. That if any war was a good war, that was a good war. That's an oxymoron when you say it, but still, there are wars and there are wars. And we had to do that. Maybe we shouldn't let it get as far as the point where we had to do it, but we had to do it. Right. And having had to do it, we gave it our darndest.
After discharge, acclimating to society, difficult?
Not really. As I said, we were not worn down like a lot of troops were. We'd had some shocking experiences, but they didn't. We weren't battle fatigued to the point that some of these other troops were, such as the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, that was a horrendous experience. And some of these other places. I mean, the Marines in the Pacific, some of their terrible fighting Iwo Jima and so on. Terrible experiences. And but it was a maturing experience, though. No matter where I put it, I forget quite what your point of your question was now, but readjusting, yeah. Well, we were more than happy to readjust to society. We were trained killers, and we'd been through hell, you might say, and yet having done it, you put it aside and get on with life. And with the GI Bill there, a lot of us could get on with our educations very expeditiously. And I was able to get on to a master's degree and a doctorate degree ultimately on the GI Bill, which was just a wonderful thing. And so I got some good out of it in that, for sure. But getting back to life was just a wonderful experience because you needed to, and you got back into it. I did not have the kind of experiences that I lost sleep over. A lot of guys did. But I never, I guess for one reason or another, got that deeply scarred by the experience. Some were terribly scarred by it. But I found it 4 years of a very interesting experience upon which I could build and learn and grow. And so that was it. Went back to life. And one interesting thing about it, as a platoon sergeant, I was in charge of a platoon of men, about, what was that? About 30 to 40 guys. And when I got into college or in the university, my doctorate was done in student personnel administration and higher education, and I got the job of being a dean of men at Berea College in 1955. And I've always said, well, as a platoon sergeant to a group of fighting men, being a dean of men to a bunch of students is a good transfer of training. because I took into that being the dean some of the stuff I used as being a sergeant, and some of them could understand that too. But in that sense, the Army did me some good. But it's an interesting thing to look back. Of course, I had other reasons for doing that too. So, I was married, as I say, when I was in service. We had our first child soon after we got out of the service, and three daughters, and they've all gone their ways. And I'm now into great grandchildren. And my wife passed away about 2 years ago. And as the events would go, my first great-granddaughter is named after her, which was a beautiful thing. So that brings me up to where I am now, and still trying to keep things going.
Okay.
Been a great experience. Thank you.
More than 60 years ago, 6 young brothers from the Koski family in Ishpeming left their hometown to fight for their country. Only 5 of the brothers survived World War II. The youngest made the ultimate sacrifice. Today, the surviving brothers, their family, and a small group of World War II veterans met in Ishpeming to honor John Koski, who died during the war. They also celebrated the service each of the brothers made during the war, as well as the service of all veterans. Speeches were given and poems were read in remembrance of fallen World War II veterans.
Life is real and life is earnest, and the grave is not the goal. Thus the war, to dust return it, was not spoken of a soul.
Members from the local military organizations joined the gathering. A nephew of the 6 Koski brothers wrote a book about his uncles titled Ordinary Heroes in honor of the service to their country.
The story was written a long time ago. It was written in the snows of the Ardennes, in the air over southern Europe, and in the mountains of Italy. It was written by the Koski brothers. It was written by the members of F-85. It was written by soldiers a lot like the people we have here. In fact, it was written, parts of it were written by some of the guys who are with us tonight.
You know, you veterans of the Second World War, I salute you, gentlemen. I applaud you. You made my way. I hope I did my part.
And it's a little bit strange for me to talk about my grandfather in terms of a war or as a soldier, because if I were to make a list of words that I thought described him, I don't think soldier would appear anywhere on it. Instead, I think of a man who was the kindest, gentlest, most giving man I've ever known, or I think ever will know.